Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the JATEX content channel. Today, we will have a panel discussion about navigating the future of mobility, and we have a very experienced guest with us. What we will address today, very important point of mobility, which is around the global trend in mobility, the technologies which is actually playing a big role in the development of this vertical. Where do you see mobility is going to in the coming 5 years, and what is the role of 5G of that? But before I will start, I would like to introduce my guest. So I would like to ask my guest to introduce himself briefly. Mr. Antoine.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Antoine Claude-Pierre. I'm the head of business development for the Middle East and Asia Pacific region for Naver. At Naver, we focus on developing autonomous solutions, being vehicles for first and last mile. So we develop autonomous shuttles that can carry people between different stations in areas such as campuses, universities, city centers. Glad to be on board today.
Thank you, Antoine. Mr. Nasser.
Thank you, and it's really a pleasure. Thank you for having me. My name is Nasser Al-Shamsi. I'm the Director of Sustainable Mobility within BIA, the leading environmental company of Sharjah, and the project manager of ION. ION is a subsidiary of BIA, which is focused on providing accessible, sustainable mobility solutions.
Thank you, Mr. Nasser. Welcome to the session. And from Dirk, Mr. Carl.
Thank you, Zakaria, and thank you for the opportunity for having me today. I am Carl Zonbart. I am the COO, one of the founders of Dirk. Dirk is an MIT spinoff that provides AI-based perception solution, sensing solution, as well as real-time analytics to help cities improve road safety and enable autonomous vehicle deployments at scale.
All right, thank you, Mr. Carl. And finally, Mr. Talal.
Thank you, Zakaria. It's a pleasure to be here. So CEO of Cactus, Talal bin Hadim, we develop AI solutions focused on optimizing fleets. So everything from analyzing driver behavior to predicting where demand is and making sure the right number of vehicles and right utilization for vehicles in the correct locations.
Thank you, Mr. Talal, and for the introduction and to all our guests. The automotive sector is one of the most growing industries globally, and in fact, it represents one of the largest opportunities for collaboration between cars, OEMs, technology providers, and telcos as well. From a research point of view, done by Analysis Mason, the total number of automotive connection will grow from 164 million in 2018 to around 831 million by the year of 2027. Well, this automotive market will actually expand even technically to use many different kind of technologies and disruptive use cases as well. And also will use different types of bandwidth as it low, like low and high. Here represented by different network like Cat-M1 and 5G as well. In the UAE, as we speak, we have more than 2 million IoT devices and sensors, and out of that, around 650,000 connected cars and mobility applications. And this number is actually expected to grow to be around 1.6 million by the year of 2027. So to cover the, some of the global mobility trends, I would like to ask Mr. Antoine, what are the main factors affecting in general the automotive market, and from that also point of view, what these factors also affecting the UAE market specifically?
Thank you very much, Zakaria, for the first question. Well, on top, I would like to go a bit further than just the automotive market. I think what is changing in our cities, including the UAE, is the way people address mobility. We see a proper evolution on the way people move around. That's actually a trend that we see worldwide and not only in the UAE. But we see that the UAE has a faster capacity to adapt and to evolve based on a culture of technology and innovation, carried by some public and private organizations. We could name some projects led by, for example, by Etisalat and the 5G that will improve the ability of the cities to adapt. So we see new usage and solutions to carry mobility. Basically, I think people are moving out of just think that the only way to move from a point A to a point B is to use a car. We think that people try to assess how to move them from a point A to a point B with any solutions available. So all in all, UAE wants to address the topics of congestion and pollution by evolving on that. So we see new mobility forms appearing: ride sharing, car sharing, free floating, micromobility, evolution of public transportation. And we think that the solution for the future of mobility in the coming years is a combination of all those solutions to get people out of their cars, limit the congestion, limit the pollution, and basically make cities and societies a better place to live in. The UAE and Dubai, with their proper goal to improve the livability of people in the cities, are working right now on those solutions. Autonomous shuttles and first and last mile is one of them. And we think there is big opportunities for the technology to improve all that. The capacities of the UAE and people like Etisalat to deploy digital infrastructure like 5G will really help to carry those solutions and to get from where we are now more on proof of concept to scalability of the solutions to address the proper needs of the city. That's how we see things on our side.
I believe that this is totally right, Antoine. And I think on the top of that, I would also consider that, you know, the leadership of the government of the UAE and the competitiveness as well, to make sure that the UAE market is number one in all things. And even some of the other points, like the quality of the roads within the UAE as well, it's also something could also affect that in general. And of course, the other technologies, as you rightly said, about, you know, connectivity and 5G, etc. And from that point of view, and specifically talking about technologies, which is actually shaping the mobility, I would like to ask Mr. Nasser from the ION project as well, you know, what do you think that the technology is actually shaping this market? What are, from your point of view, what have changed from that part, which, you know, influenced the automotive market in general?
Thank you, Zakaria. I think from an operator's point of view, and you know, by seeing the trends, the mobility trends that are you know, evolving in the past couple of years, I would say probably 20 years ago, when most automotive companies have introduced parking sensors. So you know, a parking sensor is basically a building block of what we see nowadays, you know, with the technology, or we call it ADAS, or that's the advanced driver's assistance systems. So this is basically what we see nowadays. You know, the vehicles are getting more digitized, you know, lane keeping, lane departure, autonomous radar systems within the vehicles, you know, to prevent you from front collision, rear collision, etc. So, you know, and again, this is halfway, and I think that a few years from now, personally, from an operator's point of view, that's where whatever technology that have evolved in the past is actually leading towards you know, vehicles being more autonomous, or reaching you know, level 4 autonomy, or even level 5 as well. And you know, a vehicle needs to be digital in order to be connected. So you need to connect it to other modes of transport. You know, you have the public transportation, you have trains, you have metros, etc. So, you know, to offer an accessible mobility solution, you need to have a single ticket that will take you from point A to point B using multiple modes of transport. This is where I see, you know, the building blocks that have been you know, implemented over the past years is actually leading us to where we are right now, and maybe possibly down the line in a few years.
Well, Mr. Nasser, I really like the way you have addressed it, and how you know, you're talking about end-to-end kind of a journey and so forth, which really, you know, shed the light of where we are right now within the UAE, in terms of having more, you know, smart cities have been evolving. And so there's a lot of, you know, technology within the smart city. And also after the, of course, the penetration of electric vehicle and autonomous transportation, which actually can provide a full, smart city kind of proposition, where a lot of new technologies is required, specifically from the AI and the video analytics. And for that, I'd like to ask Mr. Carl, how do you think Dirk is leveraging the AI, video analytics, smart infrastructure to prepare for the smart cities and the future of mobility in general?
Sure, thank you, Zakaria. So just to kind of provide a bit of context to the situation today in cities, you have a lot of data today available. You have sensors that are deployed, cameras here and there. You have other types of traffic sensors, all types of IoT stations that are being deployed. However, this is a lot of raw data with very little intelligence. And where we see the opportunity for Dirk is to provide a lot of that infrastructure sensing analysis using AI, using sensor fusion, behavior prediction models, so that we can extract real-time intelligence from this pool of data that is available, and then feed it back into the connected environment. So when we say connected environment, this could be connected vehicles. So we are able to analyze certain situations and then send it back directly to connected autonomous cars, so that they're aware or have better awareness of their surrounding. We can enable non-line of sight applications, so allow them to see behind occlusions, behind obstructions. And of course, we can also send information back to a backend, to the operator, where we can inform them of certain hazards, certain hotspots, safety issues, congestion issues, so on and so forth. So where now they're not just looking at raw video, or they're not just looking at a huge amount of data that they cannot process. They're really looking at intelligence. And this is where AI and IoT technologies in general is really helping us. A lot has been invested in developing on-vehicle technologies, but the infrastructure has been lagging behind, and it presents a big opportunity with those new technologies that are available to us.
And this is totally right, Carl. I think the V2X in general and cellular V2X in general is the way forward. That that the vehicles are actually talking to its surrounding, whether if it's traffic light or a pedestrian crossing or a building or garage and so forth. And this is actually which makes it much more interesting to have the or much more, I'd say, viable to have autonomous vehicle also running. But this is actually what's happening between the vehicle and outside, surrounding. What about, the intelligence required within the vehicles? And I would like to ask Mr. Talal, from Akako's side, what do you think, that kind of use cases or type of intelligence which we can provide within the vehicles, within AI and 5G as well?
A lot of features can be added within the vehicle. So you have this great vision, which is how do I get autonomous as part of the mix, and how do I get more and more autonomy into driving? And then the other component, which Carl was talking about, is how do I get data analyzed and integrated into that? And what we look at is the migration and pathway. So right now we have the largest percentage of vehicles are human driven, right? How do I analyze how they're driving? How do I mimic good driving behaviors? And how do I allow that to be part of a path towards full autonomy, or a blended mix between full autonomy and partial autonomy? So right now, the starting point of that spectrum is analyzing drivers. How is the driver behaving? How is he driving or she driving? Analyzing things like passenger behaviors, to see things like, for example, what's my utilization of the vehicle? How many people am I actually using for different types of trips? Where do I need more people or larger vehicles? Where do I need less vehicles? Using cameras, AI, sensory data to analyze that in real time. And then how do I manage the transition? Because if you talk to most managed fleets out there, which is a huge part of the number of vehicles, is not individual used vehicles, but managed fleets. So the delivery vehicles, the trucking companies. How do I take them on a path where it's more economical for them to implement autonomy, and giving them the analytics to do that, or allowing them to phase into that by a hybrid autonomous solution, where instead of having one driver assigned to every vehicle, I have one driver assigned to every two vehicles. And the way you can do that is that you know that your utilization of vehicles is 50% of the time they're waiting or they're idle. So how do I have a lower driver to vehicle ratio? So it's kind of looking at the big picture from the in-vehicle technologies and specific technologies like autonomous vehicles to how do I take the end user on a path from where they are now and using the analytics and the economies of scale to where they need to be or where they could be to improve their costs.
Well, Taral, this is so exciting. You know, the talking about hybrid autonomous vehicles is also one of the, I think, very good ideas that actually to move the market to one stage before, you know, going to even further higher levels of autonomous driving, and also, of course, to get the users and you know, people who are living in the society to get used actually the idea that, you know, I'm taking an autonomous vehicle today, and this is something I think could be a very good stage going forward. So, Mr. Antoine, from Naver perspective, as you heard, there's a lot of technology, you know, within the vehicles, out of the vehicles, within the smart cities, from Navia's perspective, and also looking that, you know, the other OEMs are also, you know, developing in these areas. What's Navia's strategy to reinvent and improve from where it is right now?
Sure. So on Navia's side, our strategy is actually to be very focused on our mission and to very focus on a niche market. We are not addressing the full automotive market. We are not trying to make individual cars autonomous. We don't think that the future of mobility for such solutions is everywhere in cities. We believe more into specific use case, which can be addressed by autonomous vehicle as of today, right now, already starting, not waiting for the technology to reach maturity that might come or not when we talk about level 5 of autonomy. So we are addressing the level 4 market, which is having autonomous vehicles on specific predetermined areas. We already have around 200 vehicles as of today in experimentation from multiple sites in 24 countries, including the UAE. And that's really where we are going. Staying on that niche market, to be really focused, having a pragmatic approach, going through experimentations, going through operations, creating and working with partners like the one present today on the panel to develop the full environment that is necessary to be able to deploy the solutions, and not addressing we could call it the big guys market on the traditional OEM, which has a goal to make any cars autonomous. But that's not where we are going. We are really 100% focused on level 4 predetermined areas and helping cities and private sites to get people out of their cars to share mobility solutions.
Well, that's, you know, looks to be a very focused strategy. Thank you so much, Mr. Antoine. Mr. Nasser, knowing that ION is a local project and local UAE project, from your perspectives, how the UAE market is compared to the other markets globally, and what's your plans within ION is to to have a higher penetration within the UAE market?
Thank you, Zakaria. I really like this question. I always, benchmark the European market, the US market, and when you want to deploy futuristic technology in the market, first of all, you go back and you look at, is the infrastructure ready? So you talked earlier about the 5G capabilities, and most of the technologies that we will be implementing in the near future, it's something related how vehicles can be connected with its surrounding, using V2X technology, using the 5G connectivity, especially in areas where there are no GPS coverage. If I look at the UAE, I think Dubai is slightly ahead of everyone, especially introducing separate lanes for taxis, introducing separate lanes for buses, and this is where I believe the case technology, we call it connected, autonomous, shared, and electric. Now, for you to implement this mobility trend, the futuristic mobility trend, you need to have the foundation ready, which is I nowadays see Dubai as ahead of the game, and that's where we can say, okay, we can connect a public transport or a public transit system into an autonomous for a last mile solution or last mile transport. This is where we can get connected vehicles like Teslas, for example. You can use you can utilize Tesla's APIs and connect them into your platform to have a single ticket, to take you from point A to point B. We're not catching up as fast, but at least we are heading into the same direction. And when I compare the UAE with other Middle Eastern or Gulf states, and I think Antoine mentioned it earlier, that we it's an innovative hub. The UAE is an innovative hub. They accept the new. They don't resist to change. They like trying out new ideas, etc.
And to be honest, I also double that. I mean, from Etisalat's point of view, you are also proud to be the fastest network on Earth, and we've been awarded for the second year in a row. So hopefully, we are working also hand in hand to make sure that the infrastructure is also available to support these initiatives. So if we, let's say, go a little bit more on a futuristic kind of vision, and the coming 5 years from now, Carl, how do you see the AI solutions scaling up? And because eventually, what matters for all of us, I think, within this panel is to have it impact positively people's lives. Where do you think this is going from your perspective and from Dirk's side?
So 5G is really going to be a game changer here, and but let me kind of put some context again around this. Historically, especially if you're talking about connected vehicles, there are legacy technologies that the automotive industry has developed, but are extremely slow to deploy. Why? Because you need the whole industry to align, to agree on financial incentives on why you need to deploy those. This is all the V2X debate that has been going on, and the problem is that if you don't have that full picture put together, it's never going to happen, right? The second issue I would say with the adoption of historically of more advanced technologies that can enable AI is the availability of compute. So in the last few years, you're starting to see a lot cheaper graphic processing capabilities that now enable AI, really for accessible for anyone, and you can really deploy now AI compute units everywhere. And 5G is really going to take that, and blow it up exponentially, because 5G brings, I believe, what are three main advantages. It's very low latency communication, it's very high bandwidth, and it's very high availability. What does that mean? That means that you can now communicate really quickly between different connected objects, which will overcome all the issue in connecting vehicles, connecting infrastructure, and then you'll start just using your 5G modems and nodes that will be in every vehicle, that will be in every traffic signal, that will be in every camera, and now you have a much seamless, much more much easier integration. And then the second point, again, because of the three advantages that I spoke about with 5G, is now we're going to be able to enable edge compute much closer to the sensors, what we call MECs, multi-axis edge computes, where now you have data, instead of going back all the way back to the cloud, will go directly to a compute node that has GPUs in it that can run sophisticated AI models, and then with a very low end-to-end latency, bring the information back to the client, to the car, to the traffic signal. And in an ecosystem like that, when everybody's talking to each other, and where you have real-time compute happening everywhere, all the use cases that we're talking about are no longer a matter of pilots, but this is where they can really become materialized and become use cases for everyday's use.
I think this is absolutely correct, Carl. We are also working on many other solutions within the 5G network as well, such as slicing as well, which hopefully can also would be a foundation also for some of the verticals, specifically in mobility. My last question is to Mr. Talal, and from your vast experience within the mobility market. When do you think that the autonomy or the AI autonomy market will become a reality, specifically in the UAE?
Okay, thanks for asking that question, because I think it's very relevant. A lot of the technologies we need to improve the economies of scale of businesses, of running operations for mobility is available. And I think that, again, just to kind of reflect on what Carl said previously, I think the game changer, and I do agree the game changer is 5G. We were ready with an on-road vehicle 2017 that we wanted to test. And I think what was stopping companies from implementing was two things. One, regulation. Regulators, it takes a lot of time and effort for them to have a sense of what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, understandably so. And the second is costing, right? It needs to cost less to operate autonomous vehicles than it would the alternative. And so if I'm gonna, for example, if I'm delivering mail, it doesn't make sense for me to buy a fleet of Teslas to deliver mail, right? It needs to, the economies of scale need to be cheaper. Now, the good news is the most expensive component of cost per delivery or cost per trip is the driver. So autonomy fits very nicely in that, regardless of the vehicle. So to answer specifically your question, I think the path towards getting it in basically mainstream use is, first of all, having the regulation passed. And I think now, again, with 5G, you can do that. The steps would be a hybrid approach. So it's like electric vehicles. People didn't jump right to electric vehicles. Manufacturing became cheaper to do a hybrid solution where it's cheaper to operate with a partially battery operated vehicle. And then eventually the economies of scale of producing these vehicles came down to where it makes financial sense to buy fully electric vehicles. I think the same is going to happen with autonomous, where we have regulation that can be approved for a remote human to operate a vehicle over 5G, and 5G enables this because of the low latency. So back to what Carl said, the low latency is a game changer. You could not do this over 4G. So now over 5G, if you have 10 millisecond response times, that's acceptable as an automotive spec solution. So you can have partial autonomy, while in the background, the technology is ready for the regulators to start approving and start making metrics for them to approve a full autonomy solution that I think we can eventually get on the roads. And
we're really looking forward for that. To be honest, I'm really excited for the discussion we had today. It really represents the different views from different angles, from a car OEM, from technology providers and operator, and the telecom provider as well. Which makes sense to this kind of collaboration, which actually the only way which can make such kind of changes in the mobility vertical happen. And because of that, I'd like to thank you for your experiences and sharing your knowledge within this panel, and for your time. And I will look forward to meet you again very soon. And I also encourage our customers to visit our JATEX stand, where actually you will see these technologies actually live. Thank you so much, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.